Gaddafi is known as a controversial figure. His alleged involvement in the bombing of planes and buildings and his support for organizations classified as terrorists by many nations are stains on his reputation. It is often overlooked that Gaddafi was also an inspiring leader capable of unifying influential figures under his vision. He defied the world's major powers and stood with marginalized nations and peoples. As a leader, he was beloved by many, and in Africa in particular. Gaddafi's rule and his eventual downfall remain subjects of significant historical and geopolitical interest, with ongoing debates about his legacy and his impact on Libya. His rule in Libya provides several lessons, both good and bad, that can be applied by leaders across Africa. In this video, we are going to be talking about 5 lessons African leaders have learned from Gaddafi. You will be surprised to know what the 4th lesson is. Let's begin. 1. The dream of a united Africa. The first thing Muammar Gaddafi taught African leaders was the dream of a united Africa. Gaddafi had a grand vision that stirred the imagination of African leaders. While it's crucial to note that the idea of a united Africa didn't originate with Gaddafi, notable figures like Marcus Garvey, Kwame Nkrumah, and W.E.B. Du Bois had already discussed it. Gaddafi championed this vision in a way that captured the imagination of African leaders. Muammar Gaddafi's vision of a united Africa was nothing short of revolutionary. He wasn't content with the status quo. He believed Africa's strength lay in its unity. Gaddafi's grand vision centered around a United States of Africa. It was a bold and audacious idea that captured the imagination of African leaders across the continent and whose realization was a threat to Western powers. One notable occasion was at the 2009 African Union Summit in Sirte, Libya. During his speech, he emphasized the need for African unity and proposed the creation of a single African government, currency, and military force. His ideas received mixed reactions from African leaders. Some African leaders, like Robert Mugabe, were supportive of Gaddafi's vision, seeing it as a path to a stronger and more influential Africa on the global stage. Others, like the leaders of the northern Arab countries in Africa, were skeptical and concerned about the challenges of merging diverse African nations into a single entity. Gaddafi's vision continued to be a topic of discussion and debate among African leaders. However, most of the leaders who supported the idea did not take any action to realize it. 2. Self-reliance and economic independence. Gaddafi's commitment to self-reliance and economic independence. This aspect of Gaddafi's leadership had a profound impact on African leaders, who recognized the importance of steering their nations towards economic autonomy. Before Gaddafi, few leaders had this quality. It takes a lot to be economically independent. Talk less about actualizing this goal. African countries have always relied on foreign help through financial aid and even loans, which have made them weak and powerless. Gaddafi's Libya was a prime example of what could be achieved when a nation prioritizes self-sufficiency. He invested heavily in Libya's infrastructure, education, and industries, transforming it from a country heavily dependent on foreign aid into a nation with a diversified and robust economy. African leaders observed how Gaddafi harnessed his country's vast oil wealth to fund ambitious development projects. He used the revenue generated from Libya's oil reserves to invest in education, healthcare, and infrastructure. This not only improved the quality of life for Libyans, but also reduced the country's vulnerability to economic pressures from foreign powers. Another case was the proposed African currency. Gaddafi envisioned a gold-backed currency called the gold dinar that would replace the US dollar in African trade. He believed this would reduce Africa's dependence on Western currencies and strengthen economic independence. We have a video on our channel on the shocking reason why Western powers feared Gaddafi's gold dinar. Make sure you watch it too. Gaddafi championed the idea of economic cooperation among African nations. He believed that by pooling resources and expertise, African countries could create a more self-reliant continent. His initiatives, such as the establishment of the African Investment Bank and the African Monetary Fund, aimed to promote economic integration and reduce reliance on Western financial institutions. If you're enjoying this video, then take a moment to encourage us to keep creating content like this for you by liking this video and subscribing to the New Tourist channel. Also, remember to turn on notifications so you're the first to know when we upload new videos. Let's continue. 3. Diversification of Alliances. Gaddafi's skill at building a coalition of unlikely allies is something not everyone has noticed. As much as we hear about rivalries between global superpowers and the politics of the world at large, Gaddafi's strategy of reaching out to countries outside of the West to forge alliances is fascinating. Gaddafi wasn't content with limiting his alliances to a select few. He believed in the power of building bridges with a wide range of nations, both big and small. Gaddafi's outreach extended not only to African nations, but also to countries in the Middle East, Asia, and even some in Latin America. He understood that relying solely on a handful of powerful allies could be risky. By diversifying his diplomatic relationships, he ensured that Libya had a broad support base on the international stage. African leaders closely watched Gaddafi use his diverse alliances to navigate complex geopolitical waters. His ability to strike deals and negotiate on multiple fronts helped Libya maintain its sovereignty and economic stability, even when facing pressure from Western nations. In 2008, during the conflict between Russia and Georgia over the breakaway regions of South Ossetia and Abkhazia, Muammar Gaddafi made a strategic move to forge an alliance with Russia. This event showcased Gaddafi's skill in reaching out to countries outside the Western sphere of influence. At the time, Western nations, particularly the United States and the European Union, were critical of Russia's actions in Georgia. Gaddafi, however, publicly supported Russia's position in the conflict. He praised Russia's stance and criticized Western intervention in the region, aligning himself with Moscow on the global stage. As the US and EU's influence in Africa is dying, we're seeing new governments like those of Mali and Burkina Faso turn to Russia for cooperation instead of France, as has always been the case in the past. Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso is talking with the Russian military about possible agreements. He's also urged African leaders to work in the interest of their people, just like Gaddafi did. 4. Navigating the storm of external influence. Muammar Gaddafi's leadership wasn't a stroll in the park. Throughout his tenure, he faced relentless opposition and sanctions from Western powers, yet he stood resolute in defense of Libya's sovereignty. African leaders, who were no strangers to external pressures themselves, closely observed Gaddafi's unwavering commitment to protecting his nation's autonomy. They watched as he vehemently championed Africa's right to self-determination, even when it meant locking horns with global giants. Gaddafi's refusal to bow down to external pressures wasn't merely a spectacle, it was a lesson in courage and resilience. It was a testament to the idea that a leader can, against all odds, safeguard their nation's principles and interests. What truly left African leaders spellbound was Gaddafi's knack for rallying support, both within Africa and from like-minded nations worldwide. It showcased a determined leader's tremendous influence on the global stage. This lesson couldn't have been more timely. As African nations grappled with various forms of external influence, from economic coercion to political interventions, Gaddafi's legacy became a guiding light. It reminded leaders that they, too, could withstand external pressures, defending their nation's sovereignty and working towards the greater good, regardless of adversity. We can see this with the recent rise of governments that are sending out Western powers from their countries. We have seen the rise of military juntas in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso that have ousted the French from their countries. 5. The power of strategic planning. In the early 2000s, Libya was facing international isolation due to its alleged involvement in various acts of terrorism, including the 1988 Lockerbie bombing and the bombing of a Berlin nightclub in 1986. As a result, the United Nations imposed sanctions on Libya, severely limiting its international interactions. In 2003, Gaddafi made a strategic decision to negotiate a settlement with Western nations to lift the sanctions and reintegrate Libya into the global community. This move was a remarkable example of his strategic planning and its profound impact on Libya's destiny. The strategic prowess of Gaddafi distinguished his leadership. He didn't merely react to events, he anticipated and planned for them meticulously. African leaders took note of how Gaddafi's strategic thinking helped navigate the complex waters of global politics and economics. For example, Gaddafi's Libya wasn't just fortunate with oil wealth, it was strategic. He leveraged Libya's vast oil reserves to fund ambitious development projects that would secure the country's future. Libya is a desert country, but he built a huge water distribution system so that all Libyans could have access to water. However, NATO was keen to destroy the pipeline when they intervened to murder Gaddafi. Gaddafi's legacy taught African leaders that visionary leaders should invest in strategies that promote sustainable development and ensure a nation's resilience in the face of global uncertainties. We can see this with visionary leaders today like Paul Kagame of Rwanda, Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana, and the military leaders of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, amongst others. African leaders have now embraced the lesson of strategic planning. They're focusing on developing their industries, investing in technology and innovation, and implementing policies that emphasize long-term stability. They've seen the power of having a roadmap for the future and how it can shape the destiny of a nation. The people of Libya regret having played a role in the killing of Gaddafi by Western powers. The country has not been stable since he was murdered. Which African leaders do you think have learned from Gaddafi? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.